Romans 19 says that the heavens declare the glory of God, the skies proclaim his work. Day after day, they pour forth speech. Night after night, their word goes out. There's no speech or language where their voice is not heard. And as most of you know, in the next within the next several hours, we're going to see the heavens declare the glory of God in a very unusual way. I got a picture here of an eclipse. And we'll be looking at this thing, and hopefully you got your eye protection and are set to go in your special spot, wherever that may be. And when we think about this eclipse coming up and the fact that it's really garnering tons of attention, from what I understand, we're not going to have one of these over the continental United States for a few hundred years after tomorrow. It's really a very beautiful picture, really, of something God is doing. And when we find in the scriptures that the heavens declare the glory of God, very often we find in nature these very potent illustrations as to how God interacts with us. And what we're going to see tomorrow really is a picture of something that's happening even now. And it answers really for us two major questions that people struggle with and have been struggling with since the beginning of time. One of the first questions that we'll be grappling with and looking at through the lens of the eclipse as well as this passage from Thessalonians is the question as to whether or not God created evil. And people ask that all the time. I get this constantly. You know, if God made everything, He's responsible for the creation of the heavens and the earth. If this is His world, as we just sang a few moments ago, then did He create Satan? Did He create wickedness? Did He create evil? Sin? Just darkness in general? I mean, that's a burning question. And people ask all the time because we live in a world that's very unjust. We live in a world that's filled with hatred and pain and darkness and depression and loneliness and aggravation and anger. We live in a world that is marred with iniquity. And we ask the question, if God made this place, is His hand in that as well? And we find in 1 Thessalonians, as we look at this eclipse as well, we'll find the answer to that very daunting question that weighs heavy on the heart. Let's take a look here at 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verses 1 through 8. The scriptures tell us this. Now as to the times and the epochs, brethren, you have no need of anything to be written to you. For you yourselves know full well that the day of the Lord will come just like a thief in the night. While they are saying peace and safety, then destruction will come upon them suddenly like labor pains upon a woman with child, and they will not escape. But you, brethren, are not in darkness, that the day would overtake you like a thief. For you are all sons of light and sons of day. We are not of night, nor of darkness. So then, let us not sleep as others do, but let us be alert and sober. For those who sleep do their sleeping at night, and those who get drunk at night. But since we are of the day, let us be sober, having put on the breastplate of faith and love, and as a helmet the hope of salvation. And we'll stop right there. We're actually going to divide this pericope, this unit here, into two sections. There's a few more verses that are tied in with 1 Thessalonians 5 here that we're going to explore next week. I decided to divide it because there's just so much in there. I wanted to make it clear and simple. So we'll look at two imperatives that crop up from this particular passage, and then we'll look at the other two later on next week. So what we find here is really there's two sections to the passage. We have the darkness and then we have the light. And what we find here is that Paul is answering a bit of a question that the Thessalonians have fired out at him. When is Jesus coming back? This idea of the second advent of Christ is a major theme throughout much of Paul's writing. We celebrate the first advent, which is Christmas, but Jesus mentions He's coming back again. And we find here that this passage is pointing us to the return of Christ. The day of the Lord, if you remember back a couple of years ago when we were studying in the book of Joel, is introduced by the prophet Joel as being this unique moment in history. The day of the Lord could be really one of three things. It could be an actual physical day. It could be a an event of some form, or it could be an entire season of events that span over a period of time. And what we find with all three of those interpretations when it comes to the day of the Lord is that it is always pertaining to judgment. God is going to do something very unique. He is going to exact justice upon humanity and upon the earth. And this is something that Paul is going to address in this passage. The timing, he doesn't say. He doesn't look back and say, okay, mark your calendars, get your day timers out, put this up on the whiteboard in your kitchen when Jesus, he doesn't give any times. But he gives us a few warning signs, things to watch for. And what we find here is there's two analogies that he draws. One is that of a thief, and the other is a woman in labor. Both of them point us to the suddenness of Christ's return, the surprise that comes with it. Thieves don't put up on Facebook when they're coming back and when they're doing things and when they're going to sneak into your house. They don't announce these things. Our home, we were building a home down in New Jersey years ago when I was a teenager. It was robbed while it was under construction. We didn't get some sort of a notification that this was happening. We just showed up one morning and realized somebody cut out the carpet from the master bedroom and took a pile of tools. All right? It just happened. It's the same thing that holds true with pregnancy. You know it's going to be coming, obviously. Someone's been carrying a little bambino around for a few months. But instantly, you could be about your business and suddenly labor comes upon. And there's sometimes no notice whatsoever. It just happens. And one of the things that we find here is that the second advent of Christ is going to catch the world by total surprise. Which leads me to, and I'm going to go out on a limb with this and say, in all likelihood, he's not coming back tomorrow. Because everybody's going to be looking up and there's more things buzzing around on the internet right now about, well, maybe tomorrow's the day and maybe this is all going to happen. And the fact that everybody's looking for it tomorrow and is attentive to it for that 20-minute period of time is probably not going to occur. Now, if I'm wrong, I will be joyfully unemployed because the rapture will actually occur and we'll be out of here. So, and I'll finish my sermon in glory, and you guys could let me know how it went. But at the end of the day here, what we find is that everyone is going to be caught by surprise. Notice what he says here. These are going to be some of the warning signs as to the second advent of Christ. The first is peace. That's not what you would expect. Peace and safety. A false sense of security will enrapture the heart of the world. There'll be this calm. There will be a group out there that everything is just fine. The economy looks good. People are getting along. We're going to the campfire and we're singing Kumbaya. And that big group hug around the water cooler is going to happen. And that false sense of security is precisely when it'll occur. It tells us here that destruction will come. Not total annihilation, not total obliteration, but all which people are trusting in, whether it be money or government or self or collective efforts, all of that will suddenly just collapse in an instant. And they'll be blinded to it. They'll be asking the question, how did this happen? Proverbs 4:19 says this, the way of the wicked is like darkness. They do not know what they stumble over. Let me give you a picture of that. Got my little candle this morning. Can you all see that? Got the candle going on. All right, let's fire this puppy up. All right. We got light. Now this light tells us something. It's a small illustration of what's going to happen with the eclipse tomorrow. Now this candle is emulating or radiating two things simultaneously. Heat and light. Now watch. If I put my hand over the candle like this, even this high, it's about 18 inches away from the candle, I can actually feel the heat of the candle. The closer I get to the source, the hotter it gets. And I'm not going any further from here. All right? Be minus the palm of my hand. All right? But notice, the heat is felt in terms of the proximity to the flame. The further I remove my hand, the colder it gets. What we find when we look at this illustration that we see throughout the entire Bible, the idea that God is light and in him there is no darkness, is that from that light we see heat and illumination. The more distant you come, the more cold it gets. We can measure heat, but how do you measure cold? It's the absence of heat. So when we're here in Vermont and it's 20 below, the reason why we say it's 20 below is because there's an absence of heat. The same thing holds true with light. How do we really know what darkness is? Darkness is what? The absence of light. So if somebody's in total darkness, they are absent from any sort of light. So if I put my hand here, just like such, what are you, I mean, obviously there's more light in the room, but suppose, let's just use our imagination for a moment, that this was the only source of light in this room, and suddenly I put my hand in front of it. What would now happen? You would be in what? A sense of darkness. And what we find here, and this is where it brings to that question, that looming question, did God create evil and wickedness? And the answer to that is no. Darkness, sin, Satan, evil, these things that we wrestle with, we grapple with, is an indication of the absence of God. So when God is not present in a person's life, in a society, in a home, in a church, we have darkness and we have cold. I want you to think about this disconnect. Jesus said in Matthew 24 that in the end times, as people drift further and further and further away, he said that the love of many will what? Grow cold. He goes on to tell us in John 16, chapter 16, verse 1, that the time will come that people will throw you out of the synagogue and even kill you and think that they're doing a service to God. That's blindness. That's darkness. That's an indication of the absence of God. Going back to what Dave read just a few moments ago from John's Gospel, this is the judgment, Jesus said, that light has come into the world. But men what? Loved the darkness. They made a choice to live in the darkness. Their affection is for darkness. Why? Because the darkness, rather than the light, for their deeds are what? Evil. For everyone who does evil hates the light and does not come to the light for fear that his deeds will be exposed. What we're going to see tomorrow, as we look up into the sky with our funky glasses on, we're going to see a picture of the eclipse of the soul. You're not just going to see the sun and the sky. But what tomorrow is going to look like, we're going to be in the middle of light. It's going to be a beautiful day. Apparently the forecast is fantastic. We're at the perfect spot to see this eclipse. But what you're going to do, you're going to look up in the sky and you're going to see this nice, beautiful, sunny day. And suddenly, something's going to come in. And it's going to be dark and cold because of the absence of the light, the distance, the blockage. And that's precisely what's happening in our culture and in our hearts today. Point number one, very simple. Darkness reveals the absence of God. He didn't create it. He didn't design it. It's something we bring upon ourselves. But we find here in the passage there's a wonderful contrast. He describes the darkness as to what humanity is going to look like. And then he goes on to explain to us this. But you, brothers, are not in darkness. That's good to know. So that this day should surprise you like a thief. You are all sons of the light and sons of the day. We do not belong to the night or the darkness. So then let us be alert and self-controlled. The contrast here couldn't be better. Now I want to bring your attention to a passage here about this contrast in Ephesians 5:8. For you were formerly darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light. He builds upon this. Notice here, for you were formerly, notice the language here. For you were formerly, it doesn't say in darkness. See, if you're in the darkness, you may have some light about you. What does it tell us here? You were formerly darkness. I checked this out in Greek. There is no prepositional phrase in this passage. Every English translation says it pretty much the same way. See, if I was in the darkness, then I have a way out. I could be a light. But this makes it very clear, I am the darkness. And so are you. And this is why we so desperately need Jesus Christ. Because He is the light. He is the truth. He is the one who's capable of rescuing us from this dominion, from this sad state of affairs. Last week we celebrated the resurrection. It was a wonderful time of contemplating the grace of God, the love of God, the sacrifice of God, the blood shed on our behalf. See, God saw our predicament. He saw that we were wandering around, bumping into each other, causing collisions all over the place, creating a mess of this planet. And He sends His Son. And it says the people who were living in darkness have what? Seen a great light, a reference to Christ. So that we can be redeemed and rescued and forgiven and restored. And suddenly we see the second part of the passage coming to life here, that if we enter into that relationship, now we suddenly have what? Illumination and warmth. And that is why Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, you're the light of the world. A city on a hill can't be hidden. Neither do people put a light under a bushel. But let your light shine before men, so that they may see your good deeds and what? Bring glory to your Father who is in heaven, who is the source of what's taking place around us. So what we find here in the passage, there's two exhortations, two commands given to us in the first portion of this pericope. The first is what? To be alert. If we're going to walk as children of light, if we're going to be bearers of light, if we're going to have anything to do with God, we've got to be alert. This idea of being alert in Greek carries with it the idea of watching, of being attentive, of paying close focus, of fixing our eyes in the right direction. The word watch or be warned appears like 24 times in the New Testament. It always pertains to the coming of Christ. To be on the lookout for this. To be watching and wary of how the world is moving. Why is that so important? Because we fall asleep. We get so wrapped up in our lives. We get so sidetracked by everything else that it becomes easy to drift in the wrong direction. So we have to be about watching. You know, when Jesus warns His disciples in Matthew 24, and that's your homework, by the way. If you want to go home and follow up with today's message and have some reading to reinforce what I'm sharing with you here, read Matthew chapter 24. Jesus warns over and over again, watch out for what? For false teachings. Watch for the signs. Watch for what's going on around you. Watch that you don't fall away. Be wary, be careful, be on the lookout. He keeps on saying it over and over again. The rest of his teaching during Holy Week revolves around this idea of being ready and being watchful and being prepared. He's not fooling around, because it's easy to fall into the darkness. So we need to be vigilant, number one. Number two, to be self-controlled. To be sober. Not to be intoxicated. Now, he's not just talking about sobriety when it comes to boozing it up. We can be intoxicated with greed, with selfishness. We can be intoxicated with anger and bitterness, We can be intoxicated with our own schedules and our own plans and our own lives. We're fixated upon it. We're focused upon it. So the watching and the sobriety that we're supposed to be exercising spiritually as well as physically that we see in the passage here is to point us in a new direction so that we're cognizant of what's going on around us and we're not caught in the dark. He punctuates this with 3 final internal commands. Be controlled, put on faith and love as a breastplate, and the hope of salvation. Faith, hope, and love. This brings us right back to that famous passage in 1 Corinthians 13 where if I have the tongues of men and angels but I don't have love, I'm what? A resounding gong, a clanging cymbal. And he goes on to explain, love is patient, love is kind, etc. and so forth. And then what does he say at the very end? 3 things remain. Faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. What enables me to walk in the light? I must have faith. Trusting in Christ. Relying upon Him. The eyes of faith open my soul to the reality of what's going on around me in terms of what God would have. His will, His plan, His design. Hope keeps me going because I realize that God is coming, that there's going to be judgment, there's going to be justice, and that keeps that flame of faith going. And love is how I interact with everybody else, and that keeps me from falling into the selfish darkness, into my own self-pity and pride and any other sin or vice or malice that I can get ensnared by, because now I'm focusing on what? Loving God and loving you and the people around me. And this we find here is the formula for walking in the light. Point. Oh, here we go. But he who practices the truth does what? Comes to the light, so that his deeds may be manifested as having been wrought with God. Therefore, we're called to what? Walk in God's light. That raises another problem. Why do we have darkness at all? And why would God even permit this to exist? We know it's the absence of God. But it raises a deeper issue. It begs a greater question. Why would this even be a factor at all? Why would he even permit this to unfold in your life and mine? The depression and the struggle. Which leads me to a final illustration, and we'll wrap it up. When I was a little kid growing up, I grew up in, I was born in central Jersey. This is a map of the United States. And if you can see my pointer over here, all right, Jersey's this little peninsula right down here. This is a light map of the United States. And when I was first born, and we lived in this little town called South River. And South River is located, if you're looking at the map here, up here this is New York, right there. And this is Philadelphia down here. And in between, there's like a million cities. You got like Newark, Irvington, East Orange, South Orange, Perth Amboy, Trenton, Camden. Don't go to Camden. Whatever you do, don't go to Camden, all right? You got Philly down there, and there's all these cities. And when I was little, this is pre-internet, okay? I'm dating myself here. We didn't have much to do at night, so we went out and we played with bugs because you had nothing to do. So you went out and you played with bugs. And there was a lot of humidity down there, and we had a lot of lightning bugs. So when we were little kids, we would go out there and we'd make lightning bug lanterns, and you catch the lightning bugs and you stick them in a jar and you run around, and that's what you did. You had nothing else to do, or you go to sleep. That was it. But I played a lot at night outside, especially during the summertime. And during the summer, when you're out there chasing lightning bugs around, you'd look up in the sky. Now down there, you can't see much. You could see a couple stars. I knew like the Big Dipper and like the Little Dipper and the North Star, and there's a couple others. I know nothing about stars other than they're up in the sky. And I saw a few of them. Why did I only see a few? Because all around here, you see this mess? This is light pollution. You've got all these factories and skyscrapers and malls and every sort of imaginable thing that requires man-made light. And the entire area is just bombarded with artificial light. So when you look up in the sky, you only see a little bit. Now, after I got married and went off to seminary and we moved up here to Vermont, we were here just the first year and we decided we were going to take the kids out camping. We went out to Brighton State Park out in Island Pond. Island Pond on the map here, all right, there's like dark. There's like nothing up there, all right? We're out there one night. We just start to camp, put the kids to bed. Mary and I are sitting around the fire, and I look up in the sky, and I'm like, holy mackerel. I never saw anything like this before. I mean, it was just gorgeous. There's like a bazillion stars, and I'm looking around, I'm like, where were all these things? And I'm growing up chasing lightning bugs around, and I'm running in Jersey, and you didn't see anything like this. I was amazed. I was stunned. I was in awe. I just sat there like with my mouth hanging open for like 20 minutes, just staring at the beauty and the night sky. And I'm thinking to myself, this is exactly what God does in your life and in mine. Why does he allow the darkness to exist? Sometimes he has to bring us into a very dark spot in order to discover him. Because it's only when we're in the darkness, deep darkness, depression, loneliness, despair, hopelessness, it's only in those very dark places that we turn to him. And that's when we discover his voice. Because when it's dark and it's lonely and we're crying out, it's then all the pollution is pulled away. All the busyness of life is pulled away. All that clutters your schedule and your heart and your mind is pulled away. It's in that darkness you hear him say, I've been waiting for you. I've been looking forward to this moment. The darkness is nothing more than the shadow of my hand bringing you to me. That's why he lets the darkness exist. Because it's in the darkness we see the light. This morning, some of you walked into this building in a fog, in a dark place. You're depressed, you're lonely, you're in pain, you're wandering about, you have decisions that are lying before you and you have no idea what to do. And you're asking yourself, God, why am I here? Why am I in this place that is so empty and lonely and cold? And that's exactly where God wants us to be sometimes, because that's where we discover him. And he finally pulls away all the clutter of life, and you see what's truly important. It's not the stuff. It's not the agenda. It's not the pollution that I bring about by my own desires and greed and selfishness. But it whittles us down to that place of discovering him. This morning, I want to encourage you, if you have not entered into that relationship, and perhaps you're in that dark spot right now, to receive Christ, to trust Christ, to turn to Christ, to recognize that he's brought you to this place in time. There's this eclipse of the soul that's taking shape. And he wants you there. So in the midst of it all, you discover the true light. And none of this fabricated, man-made stuff that seems to cloud our vision and crowd our hearts. Perhaps you're a believer in Christ. You've made that decision. But your life is filled with clutter. You wake up and you're going through the checklist. You've got 1,000,001 things. You got this goal, that goal, and you're just walking through one box after another, checking them off, 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 and there's no place for a relationship with God. You know him, but you're not growing in him. You're not walking with him. You're not seeking him. There's no joy. There's no patience. There's no peace. That's a warning light. The absence, the light, the heat, the presence is not being manifested. That should be sending a major warning light into your soul that something has to change. And God has brought you to that place of darkness so you could hear him, commune with him, and know him intimately. Let's pray.